All right, welcome everyone. It's 12 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and start the tour. And I thought it'd be sort of fun to start the tour with sort of showing everyone where the studio is. So I'm going to start from the outside going in. So my studio is in downtown Calgary. I know it's really overexposed right now, but just behind me is Knox United Church. Some cars I'm going to try to avoid here. And then in this building on the corner of Fifth Avenue and 4th Street, across from the Tim Hortons, is my studio. So here's the studio entrance right on the corner. Again, 4th Street, 5th Avenue. If you can see that, the courthouses are over there, Chevron building. So I'm in a really great location. So here at the entrance of my studio, I have one of the pieces I did a few years ago, which spawned a series I'm going to talk about later, titled Tower Migration. And this one I call the Google Tower. And I think I did it four years ago when I was doing a residency at Willow Park School. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you into the studio. I'm going to break it down into a little bit of an intro, myself, introduce you to the space, talk about some of the components of the space, and then a little bit of time for a Q&A. So here it is. So this is my space in downtown Calgary. So I've been here since June, July in the summer, so after the pandemic started. So part of the conversation this afternoon is going to be around how the pandemic shifted my work, both how I conceived of the work that I did, and of course, physically how I exist in the development and construction creation of the work that I do. And if you want, you can ask questions throughout, but I warn you, I might miss them. So I think it's better if we save it till the end. But if you have a burning question that's sort of specific about what you're looking at, we can address that sort of as I'm going, if I see it. So do be kind to me. It is my first time doing this live stream. I have a webcam, have my laptop set up here, so I think everything should be working good. And I have my wife, Carmen, in the office who's going to come flag me down if something's not looking good on the other end. So again, my name is Mark Vazquez-Mackay. For those of you who don't know me, I use the pronouns he, him, and I'm coming to you from Treaty 7 territory, downtown Calgary. So welcome and thank you everyone for joining me for this studio tour. So maybe before that, I'll just talk about why I'm doing this. So of course, we've been in this pandemic for a little bit of time now. Um, and myself, and I'm sure everyone else is feeling a little bit of a disconnect. And we were all patiently waiting for this to be over. But I think we're starting to realize that it might not be over as quickly as we were hoping it would be, and we need to adapt ourselves a little bit. So this is my first attempt at adapting and sharing a little bit of content to both inspire, give some ideas to, etc. And I hope that some other artists will jump on this and we can start share what we're doing through a medium similar to this. And I know there's various platforms that are opening up where we can share. So I'm just sort of testing it all out right now. Um, so myself as an artist, I break myself down into two parts. I'm two-thirds practitioner artist, physically developing my craft, and then one-third educator. So as a practitioner, I do multiple things, primarily painting. But I seem to always go back to painting and drawing. Um, I have done three-dimensional work. I have explored a little bit with stop motion film, sculpture, building things, etc. I like to build things. Um, and then as an educator, I teach at the Alberta University of the Arts in the continuing ed department where I teach a variety of classes. I mentor people, so I have a group of people who, in case like now, we meet virtually and I sort of walk them through their own practice and their own development. And I have people here in the studio who work with me. But of course, during the pandemic, that especially since December has very much been restricted. But I'll talk to you about that after. And then before the pandemic, I was taking people down to Mexico to both share the culture down there, give people a different perspective on a different culture, and also to make art in an environment that's a little bit different, to sort of reframe the way we do things. Um, I run urban sketching classes here in Calgary where we go around to various locations. So I do a whole bunch of things. If you're interested in any of it, of course, go to my website, Studio Vazquez-Mackay, where there's a listing of what I'm doing, which unfortunately right now isn't a whole lot, but I am starting a figure drawing class online starting this Thursday. I know it's really quick, but that's because AU Arts had some trouble with the HR stuff and the models working in my space. So I was like, well, I'll just run it for the sake of the students who are enrolled in that. So yeah, and of course during the Q&A you can absolutely address me with any other questions about what I have going on and such, and some of that will be laced into the tour here. So let's do a quick little overview of the space. So we came in the front door here, and so I'm working with 3,000 square feet. So I have quite a bit of space, and the way that I've divvied it up is that this space over here sort of operates as my classroom space. In the summer, I was having some small classes, very limited, 6 students. Right now, that's my desk where those of you who take class with me online, you see me there with the paintings, and then I have a little bit of space where I can exhibit. And then here I have my model stand, um, which again, I put this together for the AU Arts class. And so when that got pulled out, I thought, well, I better put all this to use. And then here I have my camera Obscura with the bright light on it. And I will talk to you about that and why it is that I have it in this space. So like I said, I mentor a couple of different students, one of whom is Gail, and she's been with me since the summer. And this is a space that she works in. She's a third-year drawing major at AU Arts. She's got the space with all the windows and the beautiful light because she's working with a lot of transparencies and stuff. So that's Gail's space. And then, well, that's one of my paintings. We'll come back to that. And we have a little bit of a sort of kitchenette area. And then I have a seating area with a lot of books. And you will notice there's a lot of books peppered throughout this space because I think when we're learning, that's a huge resource. And also I like sort of communal spaces because I think the sharing of ideas is really important. And then this is a space that I'm working in right now. I mean, all these spaces, they expand and contract based on what's going on in here. So this space that I'm working in, and we'll take a look at some of that work later. And then here is another little exhibition space, I guess, another working space. And then some of my drawings, a little bit of storage. I have a little, I mean, I call it a little store, but really it's a lot of materials that I just like to have on hand for myself and for students. Oh, and I should mention this is my mentor, Jose Ignacio Maldonado, who passed away in 2007. And so I have his painting right above my door here, and we can see he's right below the exit sign. So if I'm leaving the studio, I need to acknowledge him and in a sense get permission from him to be able to leave. And then here is a little bit of a space where different students who I'm mentoring are able to come and set up. This is more sort of day by day. So I have a program here that I refer to as the cart program. So the students get a cart that they pay a flat rate for. And then when they come in the space, they just sort of set up wherever there's room to make their stuff and then pack it up at the end of the day. And you can see here in the studio, I have a ton of natural light. These are all north-facing windows. I don't have any of the lights on right now. And in Calgary, for those of you who are outside of Calgary, it's really overcast. So I'm fortunate to have this much light. And then in areas like this, I just sort of do local lighting. Some of the programming that I would like to do in here when the pandemic eases up is um, have some lectures, have some film nights with some conversations around it. I think that's something that people are really looking forward to, having the opportunity to share ideas, to sort of think about how we want to re-envision our city, re-envision what we're doing, um, things like that. Because I think, especially after the pandemic, and even before the pandemic, one of the big gaps that we had was that Calgary, with our great sprawling city, we don't really communicate as much as we should. So I would like for this to be a space, almost like a creative hub where people, ideas can come together and there can be a platform for sharing different ideas. One thing that I was able to do this summer was start that, and I showed some films. They were mostly sort of Hollywood directed films with proper actors and stuff, but they were about lives of various artists. So, when all this is cleared out, this was sort of a theater area, and I was able to project it on that wall. But of course, keeping the numbers really low, so everyone was spaced out, so it didn't really have the full impact that I would have liked to have. But I think this space is serving as a real good, little trial as to what's possible with this space. All right, so my space, I'm going to first introduce you not to the work that I'm doing, but to the way that I work. So, like I said, I like to keep everything very modular, so it moves around. This is my painting cart, which is new to this space because I don't think it would have fit in any other space that I've had. It's on wheels, so I can work on multiple paintings at once, move it around, and it sort of goes with me in this space, which is really nice because I'm not the type of artist who can work on one piece start to finish. So I need to have things that I can move around and jump from one piece to one piece. And then I have sort of an auxiliary painting cart here, which I predominantly use for when I'm teaching. I need to do a demonstration in my teaching area. And then I have my drawing cart here. This drawing cart, I mean, as with a lot of things in this space, it's on wheels and the top can come off. But with this cart, the drawers hold all my inks and stuff. And then in the cart itself, I have all of my various drawing materials. So in this box, I keep my charcoal. I have powdered charcoal, Conte graphite erasers, sharpeners, more charcoal, different types of charcoal, pens, etc. So I like to have everything available when I'm making art because I find that when I'm making art, I need to I don't want to stop and think, where is that stick of Conte? I just get, in a mood where I'm on a roll and I don't want to stop. So I don't like too many distractions when I'm making my art and, sort of looking for materials. And the same goes for my painting cart. It has these drawers here and all my paint and everything is sort of right there and it's always on hand. It's never hidden away and I'm never getting distracted from sort of my objectives with the painting itself. So I'm going to skip over these paintings. I'm going to talk to you about my paintings, so sort of chronologically. So I'm going to start maybe with this big long one. So this big long one is a piece that I started. I mean, and when I say started, I documented the people who modeled for it maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And right after that, I got a residency at Willow Park. So I was a resident artist there. So I put this project on hold, and it's a very large project. So what you're seeing right now are two panels, 2 out of 5 panels. Each panel is 8 feet long. Total of 36 people came out and posed together in one session for this piece. So you get the opportunity to see a little bit of how I developed my painting. So my first sort of development is with the lines. So I start with the structure, develop that, and then once I'm happy with all my proportions and how they relate to the other proportions in the other painting or the other representations, then I come in with dark and light, right? So I get my values in, and then I come in with color. So this would represent the color, and I'm doing the entirety of the painting stage by stage. So when I do the structure, I'm doing it for every figure, for all 36, and then the value, all 36. And then I come full circle and I'm doing the color right now for all 36. So you can sort of see I'm almost halfway through them. And when I block in the color, I'm using a big brush. So I'm using, I think it's a number 16 and a number 18. So they're super large, but I'm not going into any detail. So you can see I don't have the eyes, I don't have a lot of the fingers. A lot of that stuff isn't resolved. I'll come back full circle with detail. So this is sort of stage 3 out of 4. Um, and I don't know how long it'll take me because I keep getting distracted and working on other stuff and jumping around. And back here you can see some of the other panels, some of the other stuff that I'm working on. So that's the first panel. So it's sort of, it's finished and it's hidden back there. So that's one of the older projects I've been working on, and it's quite unrealistic because when it's all assembled, there aren't too many walls in Calgary for it to be exhibited in. And then this series is an extension of that Google Tower that I showed you at the beginning of this. So this one is a series that I called my Tower Migration series. And the name of the series changed a little bit because originally it was more about the tower and then sort of the migration. And I did have it chronological, but chronological in terms of sort of people always working towards something, but then I sort of spun it around a little bit and thought people are also working away from stuff. So I explored this in various mediums. This one is probably the most prolific out of all of them. So it's on paper mounted on wood, and it started off with ink and then moved into charcoal. And then I got all my perspective lines, and then I built it up from the ground using ink, watercolor, charcoal, Conte, and gesso. And collage is sort of laced in throughout. This one I get, oh yeah, and I finished with oil paint. So all the bees are oil paint. So this one I get asked quite often, how long did it take me? Because there is quite a bit of information in it, and I suspect maybe a few hundred hours, but I never keep track because, like I said, I sort of jump around a whole lot. And this one's part of the same series. This one I did before, and it sort of found its way into the series. And then this one, this is all before the pandemic, so this would have been last fall, like 2019. And then this painting, this is a painting that I was actually working on right when the pandemic started. So middle of March, when I was the residency that I had at Willow Park, when the schools cleared out, everything cleared out and everything shut down. I was working on this and I was literally working right there. I was doing the doors and the windows, of which it would take me a day just to do doors and windows on 2 stories. So it was a very time consuming process. I would say this is maybe 50% of the way done. I like to keep it out just to remind myself that I need to get back at it. And then here's another one that I was working on. So this series, it's not finished yet, but hopefully I'll get to work back into it. So why did I stop this series? I stopped it because when the pandemic started, I had a real hard time working out of my imagination because reality seemed so unreal. So, doing these pieces that were conceptual, that I was envisioning and all that, I just thought, no, like this, the world is crazy, and I'm not going to, um, create this alternative reality for myself. Rather, what I was drawn to do was to sort of sink my teeth into reality a little bit more. And at the time when the pandemic first started, um, I had a young boy living with me, and I had my son, of course, living with me. And my wife, she's a healthcare worker, so she was at work every day, with all the stresses and stuff that come with that. Um, and I would take the 2 boys out, and we'd take these drives through the industrial areas. And no one was working, everything was shut down. And so these industrial areas, they were very desolate and very quiet. And it was sort of like the world that we left behind. And it felt like the time. So I started to take a few photos, and I did this painting. I did another car painting. And what I found was the process of painting these was very therapeutic to me. And I couldn't really articulate this at the time, but the therapy was in organizing chaos, right? If, the world is chaotic, we have this pandemic, no one knows what it's about, no one knows how long it'll be here. But if I could take something chaotic and put some order to it, that for me felt right. So I started this series, and there's a few pieces from it that I still have. Well, just three. And again, sort of biting into this really complex mess and saying, how can I make sense of this? How can I make sense of this mess? Was my therapy. And the more mature I get as an artist, the more I've sort of realized that art is always therapy. Unless you're making art to sell, then you're looking at the marketplace and what people want to consume. But for an artist like me, who just sort of, I hate to say it, but I do what I want largely. Of course, I'm very much influenced by my environment, but I don't make any of this work um, with a specific market in mind. I'm doing it for what feels right, and I think that if it feels right to me, it's going to feel right to other people, and that sort of marketplace just looks after itself. So I did that series, and then I started on. Oh, I should include this one because this one was also from this series. Um, Again, another metal scrapyard. This canvas has a little bit of a long story to it because another one of my mentors, teachers, Richard Halliday, who is a teacher at the Alberta College of Art and Design, he gave me this stretcher. So the wooden frame that's underneath here, and it's circular. And I put myself in front here so you can sort of see the scale. It's 7 feet in diameter. So it's really large. And I've had this in my studio for a long time. And when it's disassembled, it's in half. So there's 2 halves, so it's really easy to get in and out of a door. Um, and Richard Halliday had given me these, and he was a huge influence on me in my undergrad degree. So I want to sort of honor him, honor his gift to me, and do something. And he had done it just before he passed away. He had cancer, and so I was fortunate enough to be able to spend some time with him at the end there. And he gave me these, and so I've had them, geez, I don't know, 7, 8 years in my studio in half, not being able to work on them because I could never, if I put them together, I couldn't get them outside of any studio that I had. And so finally, I have a studio with double doors, So I'm able to get this huge painting out. Um, and so this one I had to use a little scaffolding to be able to get to the top and such. And these ellipses are definitely took me a little bit of time. I want to get the texture, the feeling of the rust, and sort of the surface quality of all those. So the next series that I did, I might as well show you this one because it's another circular one. Um, I've had these photos that I've taken in Mexico, and like I mentioned, 3 times a year we'd take groups down to Mexico to share the culture and sort of learn about it. Especially given that most people, when they think of Mexico, they think of the beaches and that, which is a great part of Mexico. But to be honest, the real jewel of Mexico is in the middle. That's where the oldest histories of North America are, and the best part. So we take groups down there, um, and I have my friend Enrique down there who helps us with some of that. He lives in Mexico City. Well, he's in San Miguel now, but from Mexico City, and my wife Carmen, the three of us do some of that work. But this one is a painting from a photo that I had taken across the street from Bellas Artes in Mexico City, and I changed the process a little bit with this one because what really captivated me about the image was the light and the pieces of color that were refracting off of all these artificial surfaces of plastic and such, right? So this is a vendor um, whose wares are candies and all these super colorful things, and I was really attracted to that information, but I knew myself and I knew that if I decide just to paint this, I would go in there and I would want to paint everything in high detail because that's just what we do, right? We have to sort of keep ourselves from ourselves when we're painting because we're going to get detailed way too quick. So I developed a new process by where I would blur the photo out to such a degree that you couldn't really make out what the representation was. And I would start off that way. So there'd just be light and value sensations, with a given shape. So I did that, and then I would go to the photo that's in detail and make a decision how much of it I'm going to leave in detail and how much of it I'm going to allow to be more sort of sensations of light and color. So this one, I would say it's almost done. There's just one part that's bugging me, but it's a moment away from being finished. These ones I'm calling finished. They definitely need to be in frames, right? When I painted them, I had the idea that they were going to have a pretty big frame that would be able to capture their edges because right now the edges, sort of just dissipate. So I definitely need something, a thick, girthy border to go around them to hold them in. But again, these ones were photos that I'd taken in Mexico, reflecting again on why I did it because I don't always know why I'm doing something. I would say these ones I did because there were social gatherings and not so much in Canada, but in a lot of other countries, you know, um, where you don't have all this light pollution. Light is very localized and it's usually signifying some sort of gathering of people. So I wanted to represent that. Um, and again, it's something that I'm missing. It's something that I wish was still here. And I followed the same process of the blurry photo. And what I was really trying to do with these was a little bit of a poetic gesture, I think, which was to try to represent something complex with as little as possible. Let me block the light a little bit here. So, for example, this person who's sitting there, the backpack is sort of, we only know it's a backpack because of one stroke. The economists that are sitting on this shelf, can we recognize them just with a couple of shelves? Or with a couple of strokes? The direction, the profile of this person's face, can it be understood with almost no description? The hat, again, this face that's in profile. So I sort of went moment by moment and said, how much can I get away with? with, and that is coming from my mentor Jose Ignacio. He was a poet, and that was his objective, was always to say as much as he could with as little as he could. So areas like this, just very, very suggestive, right? Again, the profile of someone's face, and then being able to say, does that person really need legs, right? Or is there enough information there? Have I said enough? And everything after that, am I not just going to be over describing something? And when you describe things too much, you sort of take away the possibility of your spectator participating. So your spectator doesn't get to sort of fill in the blanks, which I think is really important with art making. I think it's important to leave some of that stuff open, so that your spectator can get in there. But like I said, the inclination of us as artists is to describe everything because, well, I mean, if you're like me, you really like the craft of painting, of drawing. So we have to be careful of that. And now I'm going to take you over to my other work. And on the way over there, I will sort of talk about some of my ideas around art making, especially things I'm thinking a lot about nowadays, which is creativity versus craft. And I am noticing that I'm leaning more towards craft right now. So my objectives have a lot to do with painting, right? With creating something. Um, whereas my Tower Migration series, they were concerned with exploring a concept, doing research around that concept, and then coming up with a pictorial illustration of it. Whereas these ones are more just the craft. It's the execution. It's the manipulation of paint. And I guess that's sort of just where I'm at right now. Is I always go back to wanting to develop myself as a practitioner. Um, Sometimes, for me, that gets really boring because being able to just replicate a photo and paint, that just makes you a technician, right? You're not. I mean, to be an artist, you have to impose creativity. And I know that, mixing your paint colors and all that stuff requires a lot of creativity. So I'm not going to downplay that. But certainly, I like to have a good mixture of both. I want to be able to have an opportunity to research, to be able to sort of unfold ideas at the same time as having the tools to be able to describe it. I run parallels with writers and musicians, right? I mean, unless you're Sid Vicious and the Sex Pistols, like you have to be John Coltrane, you have to have good command over your language, over your instrument, and know music and stuff before you can really blow things open and do things that other people haven't done or do stuff that's really exciting. So, and writers, same thing. To be a good writer, you have to have, a good sense of vocabulary and um, writing skills. So I think it's the same with art, and I'm always going back and forth. I'm developing my skills, and just doing research on the side sometimes. So this series is a little bit of an experimentation that's coming out of the last series, and what I've done is I've asked a group of my friends, other painters, what their favorite painting is, and so in this case, my friend, he cited a Northern Renaissance painting, and I don't want to give away what the paintings are because then I think right away people start thinking, well, it doesn't look like that or it does look like it, and I want these to ultimately just be pieces unto themselves. So I'm seeing how much I can work off of a pre-existing reference, not just a pre-existing reference, but like the best pre-existing references, and make it my own painting. But within that process, I'm able to learn about the composition, color palette, etc., of other artists. Um, because by asking my friends, if I chose the paintings myself, I would have just chosen artists whose palettes I'm already familiar with and I already know how to use them. Whereas this is taking me out of my comfort zone a little bit, well, quite a bit. And I'm thinking about how to assemble things differently. So all of these paintings, there's five of them. I'm I've only done one pass with each of them. So I would say they're, 5% finished. They're literally just started. So I'm letting myself be really vulnerable with everyone because there's a good chance that, the whole series might end up in the garbage. I don't know right now, and I don't really care. And I don't know where they're going. So this painting, I don't know if there's going to be parts of representation that will come in. I don't know if I'm going to go really bold and textural with the paint. I don't know if it'll be physical. I don't know. I'm trying just to let the painting tell me what to do, which I know sounds really romantic, but it's true. I always say to students, the key is to develop your conversation with the piece, right? So to try to let the piece guide you rather than having a preconceived idea of how you want the painting to look, and then just sort of executing it. Because again, then you're just a technician, right? You're just doing the work. You're not actually coming up with any creative resolves for any problems that you're encountering or any direction that you might want to take it and you don't know how to take it there. So I think it's good to try to let the work guide you as much as possible. And I would say for me, the Tower Migration series, that was the epiphany of that process for me. I didn't really know where any of those were going. I didn't know what they would look like when I was making them. Um, this painting, I'm sure everyone knows which one it is. But this one, funny enough, two of my artist friends chose it, which is it's the only one. I only solicited six different artist friends, and two of them chose this one, which I thought was pretty cool. And then, um, yeah, so that's what I'm working on now. One thing that I did sort of skip over were all these portfolios. So I have all these portfolios full of my drawings. Now, when the pandemic started, one thing that I did decide to do was to go out into my studio and do a inventory of all my drawings. And what I found was I had over 3,600 drawings stashed away in various places. Um, so I documented all of them. And through that process, I also probably threw out, I don't know, 70% of them. So I just kept the ones that I thought were good or that had meaning for me. But these are loaded with various drawings, and you can see, and you probably note it with my other work, I don't restrict myself to any material or singular way of working. I know for some people, there's a lot of comfort in that, right? I'm a watercolor painter, whatever the case may be. And I guess I could say I'm an oil painter, but at the same time, I do think of myself as an exploratory artist. So if I get good at something, I'll quit doing that and start doing something else. So I sort of shoot myself in the foot in that respect for being commercially successful because galleries they usually like some consistency. But this is where it's at for me. I always need to be trying something new. Um, and and I allow myself to be vulnerable, which I think is really important for students to be able to see that vulnerability, um, and that I constantly fail or I do stuff, and I don't even know how I'm using the term fail to be honest, but I'm doing stuff that I don't think is successful as a finished product, but I don't really care either because I enjoy the process of making the work. And so that's where I'm sort of interested is the creativity, is the resolve of problems, is the um, just being in the space. And then, like I said, as a teacher, as a mentor, sharing all that knowledge and seeing other people make their thing and with them allowing me to be part of that process. I think that's a great honor, and I really enjoy being able to see other people's development and sort of help them in their own journey with their work. Oh yeah, camera obscura. I was going to show you guys the camera obscura before I started with the. And so the story of the camera obscura is that I was given this device, not firsthand by Chris Cran, but he gave it to someone else who gave it to me. And Chris Cran, when I was a student, he was very much interested in optics. At the time, David Hockney had come out with his research that he, published his book called Secret Knowledge with a consequent BBC documentary on it. So Chris Cran had this made, and he had it at the Science Center for a little while. And then once he was done with it, or the Science Center was, I was brought on board to exhibit it at Beakerhead. And then I end up with it where I now share it with students at, in with the Calgary Board of Education and the Catholic system, so that they can learn about optics, they can learn about science, etc. So the camera obscura, as it sounds, obscura just means dark in Latin. So it's a black box. So it's just like the large format cameras, a black box, and it's got to be dark inside, as even your film camera had to be, right? You couldn't accidentally open the back and expose it. So this is just a black box, and there's a hole here. And covering the hole is a lens. Sometimes I use a pinhole, which is really fun because the information will still travel through, but the lens is nice because it really crystallizes the information. So I'm going to put the lens in there. Now, I said there's nothing inside. I sort of lied. There's a sheet of mylar, frosted mylar. So the frosted mylar is just suspended in the middle so that we can see whatever's outside here. So this still life out here, that information travels through there and ends up inside. So historically, artists wouldn't have had a sheet of mylar. They would have had a canvas in there, and they would have been in there, sort of tracing out whatever is being projected. So the Mona Lisa, etc. So I'm just going to stick the camera in so you guys can see that is being projected on the sheet of mylar, which is quite fascinating because I would suggest that it's far more beautiful than the actual still life, right? It has a softness to it, a very shallow depth of field. Um, it looks like a historical painting. And that's how, it's believed artists would have made their paintings back in the day before the advent of photography or before the chemists figured out how to asphyxiate the image inside the camera. It would have been an artist in there with his or her paints doing that same thing. Now, I've had that camera for years and I've never actually gone in it and tried to make anything. So I've never used it. I've just shared, its history and stuff with everyone. But I did that for the first time a few weeks ago. So I had my wife Carmen go in there, or she was sitting outside, a brace so that her head wouldn't move and all that. And I went in there to do her portrait, thinking that I could sort of, do some work in the tradition of those artists and to really understand it. And what I realized was it's way harder than I thought, way harder. Because when you're in there, you have a shadow projected. And then when you paint something dark on that shadow, you can't actually see what you're painting, right? Because you're painting over top of darkness. So I suspect the artist would have done one of two things. They would have either had a candle in there so they could have periodically look at what they've done, or they would have simply used that device to trace and get accuracy of form and proportion, and probably a separation of light and dark, which would be where chiaroscuro and Caravaggio's extreme contrast aesthetic would have come from. So that's the way I think they worked in there. I got discouraged. I was like, this isn't working, and I haven't gone back in there to make anything since. But I might go back in there and see if I could really hone in on that traditional way of working. But I have like three other projects that I want to, and I'll probably be starting those in the next few days or in the next week. In addition to that painting, in addition to these paintings, in addition to always drawing, in addition to mentoring, to uh, teaching, and also I just finished a mural at a place called Rouleau Manor with a population that informed what they want the mural to be about and also worked with me in the execution of making the mural. So I just finished that last week. So I do a lot of community projects and stuff, of which most were put on the side burner until this is over. So I was very lucky that that one happened. Um, so I think that's sort of everything in my space here. And maybe I'll open it up to some questions now if anyone had some. And I know these videos have a little bit of a delay, so you'll have to forgive me if if I'm sort of inconsistent with how I'm answering all the questions. Oh, maybe you guys are just really easy and I answer to everything. Um, but yeah, on that note, if there aren't any questions, just remember, take a look at my website for things that are coming up, because once we get rid of this virus to a reasonable degree, I want to start, very safely bringing people into this space to share their ideas, to work with them, to help them with their projects. So take a look at my website, check in on it periodically, and sort of see what's going on. And of course, if you have any ideas and you want to host something, I'm open to that too. Last summer, I had three other artists, teachers who came in my space, and they were also teaching in here and sharing their knowledge with people. So I don't want it just to be, about me and what I'm doing. But I want everyone to have access to things that are going to help them grow and develop. So where can you find my website? So my website is Studio Vazquez-Mackay at .com, and it has my portfolio. It has everything on there. I'll just type that in. Because I know the spelling is all over the place. Yeah, there it is. All right. Well, if there aren't any questions, I'll stick around here for a little bit. But thank you, everyone, for dropping by. And hopefully, when the pandemic lightens up, you guys can come down and physically see this space. Yes, yes. That'd be great, Colette, if some of the students at Willow Park were able to come. And for those of you who don't know about Willow Park, it is a CBE Learning Through the Arts middle school. So 5 to 9. That's where I had my residency for almost 4 years. Pandemic sort of interrupted me. Um, but yeah, they get to learn through the arts. They have a fantastic faculty, including Colette, who deliver a lot of the curriculum through various arts, dance, music, poetry, visual arts, and all that. I mean, it's the school that I wish I could have gone to as a kid. Yeah, great to see you, Stephen. I'm hoping things are good out there in Ontario, and thank you for swinging by. Well, you're welcome for the tour. It's nice. Like I said, I think during these times we have to make a very deliberate effort to bring community together. I mean, we always do, but I think more so now in a city like Calgary that's spread out, and the winters that we have that are horrible and keep us separated. And then you add the pandemic to that, we're going to have to work really hard. Thanks, Gail. Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, so Jay Kelly Yeah, the process of the blurry photos, I'm actually going to extend that because what I figured out is if, I'll show you one of my images. So this is the image of Mexico City. This is what I started with, the photo that I'd taken 2 years ago, where I thought, one day I want to try to capture that. Oh, wrong one. And I'll just show you what I turned it into, or maybe I won't because I can't find that one. I'll have to use another example. So this is the one photo where we saw that piece, and then I turned it into this. So I blurred it out a whole lot. So I'm doing that process with these ones, but what I also discovered with my camera Obscura, if I use the pinhole rather than the lens, I end up with a very blurry photo. So I did some photos of myself. I did some self-portraits, and they're really, really blurry. So I'm going to try the process of doing a painting of those. So it'll be an image projected through a pinhole the size of a dime onto a sheet of mylar where it's digitally recorded with a cell phone that I'm then going to do a painting of. So it's this process of taking something very old, because even Aristotle wrote about the pinhole. It's been known forever, um, all the way up to an iPhone, which is super tech, and then back to painting, which again is really, really old. So like this, like going back and forth through time with my processes. I'm really excited about that. So, and they're just going to be small self portraits, tiny ones. I did the photos, which was also really cool because I was using my Apple Watch as the shutter while my phone was inside the camera. So again, without that technology, I wouldn't have been able to do this process. Oh yeah, so I didn't talk about this piece behind me too much. Like I said, it was a conception that's quite a few years old, but my idea behind it was, I guess I've done a lot of figurative art. When you do a lot of figurative art, you have to put yourself in the history of that. And when you put yourself in the history of being a figurative artist, you have to acknowledge, the male gaze, the the even the Greeks when they were doing men as the ideal, they were very muscular, right? They were like men who could go and hunt and gather and stuff, or win Olympics. So the representation of people have always been that of a idealized representation, and we're seeing that now in photography with fashion photography and stuff. But what I've been really attracted to, and like I said, what I'm always attracted to, is vulnerability, and that's sort of tough because when we look at an image, we look at it through our own image. So when we see a figure, we reflect on ourself, and people don't like seeing vulnerability in figures. But I think it's really important to show real people. So that piece came out of an influence by a photographer named Spencer Tunick, who does he goes to a city and he puts out a call. Everyone who wants to come to this field and get naked, I'm going to photograph you. So like your average person shows up because your average person isn't being solicited by a fashion photographer. So he gets this very, I think, a more truthful range of body types. I mean, to a degree, of course. Um, and so I thought that was really great. And then at the same time, Dove had this campaign where they were trying to show more diverse bodies, more diverse body types, and I thought that's really great too. So I saw this movement towards a better representation of body types and more sort of body positivity rather than here's the ideal, let's all admire it. So with that piece, I thought if I just put out a call and everyone can come, um, then I would get a little bit more diversity. But of course, with that, there's only certain people who are willing to come out and be vulnerable. So, and that can also be a cultural thing, right? Some cultures, it's very shameful to be vulnerable, right? You don't do that. So I wasn't getting a great selection, but I did get, I think, a pretty good selection. Um, and there was no qualification, and um, I did there were probably 100 people who contacted me who I walked them through a lot of, they're saying like, I'm really insecure. I've had a couple of kids. I think, this, that, and the other of myself, but this seems like the right thing to do. So I was going to them and saying, yeah, this project isn't about, idealization, but it's about acknowledgement of our own physicality. Because let's face it, without our physicality, like we're done, right? Like our whole existence is of, you know, physical being. I mean, if you're like me and you don't believe in the afterlife, but it's yeah. So that's what that project was about, and I had rented out a space, a big dance studio, and I didn't know if 100 people would show up. I didn't know if 5 people would show up, but I said, whoever shows up, I'm going to paint them in almost life size. So that's where that project came from. Any other questions? Thanks for that. All right. On that note, I'll go ahead and end the stream. So thanks everyone. And feel free to send me an email if you go into my website. You can contact me that way. And if you have any questions, or if you're interested in any of the work you saw, just let me know. And thank you everyone for coming. Have a great day.